Me, Maggie, a 20-something art history graduate, armed with a degree that's about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. You know, because the world is just begging for another person who can passionately explain why Renaissance painters were the original influences. I mean, sure, I can tell you all about the symbolism in Botticelli's The Birth of Venus, but can I pay my rent with that knowledge? Absolutely not. I'm living in a shoebox apartment that smells vaguely of stale ramen and broken dreams. The walls are this weird beige colour that I'm pretty sure was chosen to evoke a sense of despair. My furniture is a mismatched collection of hand-me-downs and IKEA rejects. My couch has a suspicious stain that I've covered with a strategically placed throw pillow, and my coffee table is literally a cardboard box with a tablecloth draped over it. Classy, right? Oh, and let's not forget my cat, Mr. Whiskers. He's a judgmental little furball who spends most of his time staring at me like I'm the biggest disappointment of his 9 lives. I swear, every time I open a can of tuna, he looks at me like, "Is this really all you've got going for you?" Anyway, I'm working this soul-crushing job as a barista at a pretentious coffee shop called Brewed Awakening. The customers are the worst. They order drinks like a half-calf oat milk lavender latte with a whisper of cinnamon, and then get mad when I don't immediately know what that means. One guy literally snapped his fingers at me once and said, excuse me, I asked for extra foam, not cloud foam. There's a difference." I wanted to pour the entire pitcher of steamed milk over his head, but instead I just smiled and said, "Of course, sir, my apologies." Meanwhile, my so-called friends are all out there living their best lives. Sarah just got promoted to manager at her marketing firm. Jessica is backpacking through Europe, and Emily is engaged to some guy she met on a dating app. And then there's me, sitting in my apartment, eating cereal straight from the box because I can't afford milk, and binge-watching Real Housewives reruns. My family isn't much help either. My mum calls me every other day to ask, "When are you going to get a real job?" And my dad sends me articles titled "Top 10 Careers for Art History Majors." Spoiler, there are none. Even my little brother, who's still in high school, has started giving me career advice. Last week, he said, "You know, Maggie, you should really consider becoming a YouTuber. You've got that whole hot messes thing going for you." Thanks, bro. So, yeah, life's not exactly going according to plan. I'm drowning in student loans, my car is held together with duct tape and prayers, and my love life is basically non-existent. The last guy I went on a date with spent the entire time talking about his fantasy football team and then had the audacity to ask if I wanted to split the bill. I said no, obviously, and then blocked his number. But the real kicker came a few weeks ago. I was on my way to work, running late as usual, when my car decided to give up on life. It just died in the middle of the road, like it was auditioning for a role in a tragic indie film. I had to call a tow truck, which cost me my entire grocery budget for the month, and then walk the rest of the way to work in the rain. By the time I got there, I looked like a drowned rat, and my manager took one look at me and said, "Maggie, we need to talk." Turns out the coffee shop was going in a different direction, and they didn't need me anymore. I tried to argue, but they just handed me my final paycheck and showed me the door. So there I was, standing in the rain, jobless, carless, and feeling like the universe had personally decided to ruin my life. That night, I sat on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, eating ramen, and scrolling through Pinterest at 3 a.m. because, that's what you do when your life is falling apart. I stumbled across this DIY candle-making tutorial, and something just clicked. I thought, how hard can it be? And ordered a candle-making kit online using the last of my credit card limit. When the kit arrived a few days later, I was equal parts excited and terrified. I cleared off my kitchen table, which mostly just involved moving a pile of laundry to the floor, and got to work. My first few attempts were disastrous. I burned myself, spilled wax everywhere, and accidentally created a candle that smelled like burnt regret. But then I had a breakthrough. I mixed together pine, lavender, and a hint of vanilla, and the result was magical. It smelled like a forest nymph's dream, and I was so proud of myself that I immediately named it Enchanted Woods and listed it on Etsy. I didn't expect much, maybe a sale or two if I was lucky, but it was something. A tiny spark of hope in the midst of all the chaos. Little did I know that spark was about to turn into a full-blown wildfire. So, there I was, sitting in my disaster zone of an apartment, surrounded by half-finished candles, wax spills, and the faint smell of desperation. My kitchen looked like a craft store had exploded, and Mr. Whiskers was perched on the counter, judging me harder than ever. But I was determined. I had this idea, this little spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could turn my life around. Let me tell you, candle making is not as easy as those Pinterest tutorials make it look. The first time I tried, I thought, how hard can it be? You melt some wax, add some scent, and boom, candle. Oh, how naive I was. My first attempt was a disaster. I didn't realize you had to measure the wax carefully, so I ended up with this lumpy, misshapen blob that looked like it had been sculpted by a kindergartner. And the scent? I accidentally used way too much lavender oil, so it smelled like a grandma's perfume factory had caught on fire. But I didn't give up. Nope, I was like a determined little candle-making warrior, armed with my glue gun and a dream. I watched YouTube videos, read blogs, and even joined a Facebook group for beginner candle makers. Yes, that's a real thing. And let me tell you, those people are intense. They have strong opinions about wick sizes. My second attempt was slightly better. I managed to pour the wax without spilling it everywhere, and the candle actually looked like a candle. But when I lit it, the flame was so tiny it looked like it was on life support. I sat there, staring at this sad little flame and thought, is this a metaphor for my life? But then, on my third try, something magical happened. I mixed together pine, lavender, and a hint of vanilla, and the result was perfection. It smelled like a forest nymph's dream, and I was so proud of myself that I immediately named it Enchanted Woods. I even made a little label for it using my printer and some sticker paper. Okay, fine. The label was a little crooked, but it had character. I listed it on Etsy along with a few other candles I'd made, and waited, and waited, and waited some more. For the first few days, nothing happened. I refreshed the page obsessively, hoping for a sale, but all I got was a notification that someone had favorited my shop. Thanks, random stranger. You're the real MVP. But then, one morning, I woke up to an email that made me scream so loud Mr. Whiskers fell off the couch. I'd made my first sale. Someone in another state had bought my Enchanted Woods candle. I was so excited I cried. Okay, fine. I might have also cried because I realised I had to figure out how to ship it. But still. I packed the candle carefully, wrapping it in tissue paper and adding a handwritten thank you note. It said thank you for believing in my candles, and by extension, me. I even drew a little smiley face on the box because, branding. When I dropped it off at the post office, the clerk looked at me like I was insane because I was grinning like a maniac. But I didn't care. This was it. This was the beginning of something. Over the next few weeks, I started getting more sales. At first, it was just 1 or 2 a week, but then it started picking up. I was still working at the coffee shop. Yes, I got another job because, bills. But every spare moment was spent making candles. My apartment was a mess. My hands were covered in wax burns, and I was running on caffeine and sheer willpower. But I didn't care. I was doing something I loved, and it felt amazing. Of course, not everything went smoothly. There was the time I accidentally set off my smoke alarm while testing a new scent. Turns out, cinnamon spice is a lot more flammable than I realised. And then, there was the time I ran out of wax, and had to drive to 3 different craft stores to find more. Pro tip: if you ever need wax in a hurry, don't go to Michael's on a Sunday. It's like the Hunger Games in there. But despite the challenges, I was making progress. My Etsy shop was getting more traffic and people were leaving glowing reviews. Pun absolutely intended. One woman wrote, "This candle smells like happiness in a jar. Thank you for bringing joy into my home." I cried when I read that. Okay, fine, I cry a lot. But can you blame me? Meanwhile, my friends were still out there living their best lives, posting Instagram stories from tropical vacations and fancy brunches. I'd see their posts and feel a pang of jealousy, but then I'd remind myself that I was building something that was mine. And then, one day, it happened. My candles went viral. So, there I was, officially a candle-making entrepreneur, or, as I like to call it, a wax wizard. My Etsy shop, Wick and Whimsy, was starting to gain traction, and I was equal parts excited and terrified. I mean, who knew that mixing wax and essential oils could be so stressful? At first, it was just me, my glue gun, and a prayer. I was making candles in my tiny kitchen, which was now permanently covered in a thin layer of wax. My stove looked like it had been through a war zone, and my microwave was basically a wax melting station. Pro tip: don't microwave wax, unless you want to spend hours scrubbing it off, trust me. I was working late into the night, pouring candles, packaging orders, and handwriting thank you notes to customers. My handwriting is atrocious, so those notes probably looked like they were written by a kindergartner, but I figured it added to the charm. Or at least, that's what I told myself. My cat, Mr. Whiskers, was not impressed. He'd sit on the counter watching me with this look of pure disdain, like, "You're really doing this, making candles, in my kitchen?" But I didn't care. I was on a mission. The first few weeks were a blur of wax spills, burned fingers, and frantic trips to the post office. I was still working at the coffee shop during the day, so I'd come home exhausted and immediately start making candles. My social life was non-existent, but honestly, that wasn't much of a change. Then, one day, it happened. My candles went viral. Okay, fine. It wasn't exactly viral in the traditional sense, but one of my customers, a TikTok influencer named Hutch Glow with Grace, posted a video raving about my Enchanted Woods candle. She called it the best candle I've ever smelled, and showed off the cute packaging and handwritten note. Overnight, my Etsy shop was flooded with orders. I woke up to 50 notifications, and at first I thought I'd been hacked. But no, it was real. People actually wanted to buy my candles. I was equal parts thrilled and panicked. Thrilled because, hello, my candles were a hit. Panicked because I had no idea how I was going to keep up with the demand. I was still making everything by hand in my tiny kitchen, and I was running out of supplies faster than I could say wax melt. I spent that entire weekend in a candle-making frenzy. I was up until 3 a.m, pouring wax, labelling jars, and packing orders. My apartment looked like a candle factory had exploded, and Mr. Whiskers was not amused. He kept knocking over jars and batting at the wicks like he was trying to sabotage me. Maybe he was. But somehow I managed to get all the orders out on time, and the reviews started pouring in. People loved my candles. They loved the scents, the packaging, the handwritten notes. One woman even said my candles smelled like happiness in a jar. I cried when I read that. Okay, fine, I cry a lot, but can you blame me? With the sudden influx of orders, I realised I needed help. I couldn't keep doing this alone. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired an employee. Enter Jake, a quirky college student with a love for puns and an unhealthy obsession with the office. He showed up for his interview wearing a shirt that said, "Wax on, wax off," and immediately won me over with his enthusiasm. Also, he was the only person who applied, so there's that. Jake was a godsend. He helped me pour candles, pack orders, and even came up with new scent ideas. His s'mores by the campfire candle was a hit. He also had a knack for making me laugh, even when I was stressed out of my mind. But as much as I loved having Jake around, I quickly realised that my tiny apartment was no longer big enough for my growing business. I needed a real workspace. So I did something even crazier than hiring an employee. I rented a warehouse. Okay, fine, it was more like a glorified storage unit, but it was mine. I moved all my candle making supplies out of my apartment and into the warehouse, and it was like a weight had been lifted. Literally. Have you ever tried carrying a 50-pound block of wax up 3 flights of stairs? Not fun. With the new space, I was able to ramp up production. I started experimenting with new scents like ocean breeze and vanilla chai, and even branched out into other products like bath bombs and scented oils. My Etsy shop was thriving, and I was starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, I could make this work. But of course, nothing good comes without challenges. I was running a legit candle-making operation out of a glorified storage unit that I like to call my warehouse. It was basically 4 walls, a concrete floor, and a single flickering light bulb. But hey, it was mine. Jake and I were churning out candles like nobody's business, and my Etsy shop was getting more traffic than a Black Friday sale. But let me tell you, success is not all rainbows and unicorns, or, in my case, lavender-scented candles and glittery bath bombs. There were days when I felt like I was juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle on a tightrope. One of the biggest challenges was keeping up with the demand. I'd wake up to 50 new orders every morning, and no matter how many candles Jake and I made, it never seemed to be enough. There was one week where we worked 16-hour days fueled by caffeine and sheer desperation. I'm pretty sure I hallucinated at one point and thought I saw Mr. Whiskers wearing a tiny apron and helping us pour wax. Spoiler, he wasn't. He was too busy napping on a pile of packing peanuts. Then there was the issue of supplies. I was going through wax, wicks, and essential oils faster than I could say enchanted woods. One day, I ran out of lavender oil in the middle of a big order, and I had to drive to 3 different craft stores to find more. Pro tip, if you ever need essential oils in a hurry, don't go to Michael's on a Sunday. It's like the Hunger Games in there. And don't even get me started on shipping. I quickly learned that the post office is a special kind of hell. There was the time I accidentally sent a customer in California a package meant for someone in Maine. Turns out, Portland is not as unique a city name as I thought. And then there was the time I dropped off 50 packages at the post office, only to realise I'd forgotten to put the labels on half of them. The clerk looked at me like I was the human embodiment of chaos, and honestly, she wasn't wrong. But the real kicker came when I got my first negative review. It was from a woman who claimed my ocean breeze candle smelled like low tide at a fish market. I was devastated. I spent hours second-guessing my scent combinations and even considered giving up altogether. But then, Jake reminded me that you can't please everyone, and he was right. Also, he pointed out that the woman had only given 1-star reviews to every product she'd ever bought on Etsy, so maybe she was just a professional hater. Despite the challenges, I was determined to keep going. I started experimenting with new scents and products like vanilla chai candles and lavender dreams, bath bombs. I even designed a line of gift sets for the holidays, complete with cute packaging and handwritten notes. My handwriting was still atrocious, but I figured it added to the charm. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any crazier, I got an email that changed everything. I was knee-deep in wax and packing peanuts when I got an email that made me scream so loud Jake thought I'd set myself on fire. Again. It was from a major lifestyle brand, asking if I'd be interested in having my candles featured in their stores. At first, I thought it was a scam. I mean, who wouldn't? The email was way too professional, with words like synergy and brand alignment, and I was just a girl with a glue gun and a dream. But after some frantic Googling and a few panicked texts to Jake, I realised it was legit. I spent the next 48 hours preparing for the meeting of a lifetime. I made a PowerPoint presentation, which, by the way, is not as easy as it looks when you're running on 3 hours of sleep and too much caffeine, printed out samples of my candles, and even bought a blazer from Target so I'd look professional. Spoiler, I still looked like a college student who'd borrowed her mum's clothes. The meeting itself was a blur. I remember sitting in a conference room that was fancier than my entire apartment, trying not to spill my water bottle on the polished table. The executives were nice enough, but they kept using words like market penetration and scalability. And I had to resist the urge to Google what those meant under the table. But somehow, I managed to hold my own. I talked about my passion for candle making, my commitment to quality, and my vision for the future of Wick and Whimsy. Okay, fine. I might have also thrown in a few buzzwords I'd memorised from Shark Tank. And then, just like that, they offered me a deal. My candles would be featured in 50 of their stores across the country, with the potential for more if they sold well. I was ecstatic. I called Jake as soon as I left the building, and we celebrated with pizza and the office marathon. Because, of course. But with the big break came even bigger challenges. First, there was the issue of scaling up production. I couldn't exactly make 10,000 candles in my glorified storage unit, so I had to find a manufacturer. This turned out to be harder than I thought. The first company I contacted quoted me a price that was so high I thought they'd added an extra zero by mistake. They hadn't. The second company seemed great until I realised they were using cheap synthetic fragrances instead of the high-quality essential oils I'd been using. Finally, after weeks of searching, I found a manufacturer that met my standards. They were a small, family-owned business, and they shared my commitment to quality. Also, they didn't laugh at me when I cried during our first meeting. Bonus points for that. Then there was the issue of branding. The lifestyle brand wanted me to create a new line of candles, exclusively for their stores, which meant coming up with new scents, packaging, and marketing materials. I spent weeks brainstorming ideas, testing scents, and designing labels. Okay, fine. I spent 1 week doing that, and the other 3 weeks panicking and eating way too much ice cream. But somehow, it all came together. The new line, which I called Whimsical Wonders, was a hit. The candles had names like Starlit Serenade and Mystic Moonlight, and the packaging was so cute it made me want to cry. Again. When the candles finally hit the shelves, I was a nervous wreck. I spent the entire day refreshing the lifestyle brand's website, waiting for the first reviews to come in. And then, just like that, they started selling out. It was surreal. My candles, the ones I'd made in my tiny kitchen with a glue gun and a prayer, were now in stores across the country. People I'd never met were buying them, loving them, and posting about them on social media. It was like a dream come true. But of course, with success comes attention. And not all of it was good. Now I was riding high on the success of my Whimsical Wonders line when the universe decided to remind me that nothing good comes without a little drama. It started with the DMS. Oh, the DMS. As soon as my candles started selling out, my Instagram inbox became a war zone. There were the usual messages from people asking for discounts, free samples, or advice on starting their own candle businesses. Pro tip: if you're going to ask someone for business advice, maybe don't start your message with, "Hey girl." But then there were the other messages, the ones from people I hadn't heard from in years, like my high school frenemy Jessica, who sent me a message saying, "OMG, I always knew you'd make it big." Funny, because the last time I checked, she'd unfollowed me after I posted a selfie with a double chin. And then there was my ex, Mark, who sent me a casual, "Hey, stranger," text like we were old pals. Spoiler, we weren't. The last time we'd spoken, He'd told me my candles were a waste of time. But the real kicker came when my former boss from the coffee shop sent me a LinkedIn request with a note that said, "Let me know if you're hiring." I almost spit out my coffee when I saw it. Okay, fine, it was tea. I'd given up coffee after one too many caffeine-induced panic attacks. The audacity was astronomical. Like, bro, where were you when I was crying over my credit card statement and eating ramen for the 47th night in a row? But instead of being bitter, okay, maybe a little bitter, I decided to have some fun with it. I started posting passive-aggressive memes on Instagram like, when your empire is thriving, but your friends are still stuck in 2018 energy. And you know what? It felt good. But the drama didn't stop there. Oh no, it got worse. One day, I got an email from a lawyer representing a big-name candle company. They claimed that my Enchanted Woods candle was too similar to one of their scents and threatened to sue me if I didn't stop selling it. I was devastated. Enchanted Woods was my baby, my first success, the candle that started it all. I couldn't just give it up, but I also couldn't afford a legal battle. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I reached out to a lawyer friend of mine, Sarah, who specialised in intellectual property law. Okay, fine, she wasn't exactly a friend. We'd gone to high school together, and she'd once borrowed my favourite sweater and never returned it. But desperate times call for desperate measures. Sarah agreed to help me, and after weeks of back and forth, we managed to reach a settlement. I had to tweak the scent slightly and change the name to Mystic Forest, but I got to keep selling it. It was a win, but it left a bad taste in my mouth. And not the kind you get from eating too many scented candles. Wait, no, don't eat candles. But just when I thought things couldn't get any crazier, they did. I was sitting in my penthouse office. Okay, fine. It was a slightly nicer warehouse with a desk and a plant I'd named Gerald, surrounded by candles that smelled like success and spite. My business was thriving. My bank account was healthier than it had ever been, and I was finally starting to feel like I'd made it. But of course, nothing good comes without a little chaos. The first sign that things were getting out of hand was when I realised I hadn't slept in 3 days. I was working around the clock, juggling meetings with manufacturers, designing new products, and trying to keep up with the endless stream of emails and DMs. Seriously, why do people think it's okay to message you at 2 a.m. asking if you sell unicorn-scented candles? I was running on caffeine, adrenaline, and the occasional granola bar I found buried under a pile of paperwork. My hair was a mess, my nails were chipped, and I was pretty sure I'd been wearing the same sweatshirt for a week. It had a wax stain on the sleeve, but I told myself it added to the quirky entrepreneur vibe. But the real wake-up call came when I missed my best friend's birthday party. Let me back up for a second. My best friend, Emily, had been there for me through everything. The ramen nights, the car breakdowns, the existential crises. She was the one who'd helped me pack my first Etsy orders and listened to me cry when I got my first negative review. And I'd missed her birthday because I was too busy preparing for a meeting with a potential investor. When I realised what I'd done, I felt like the worst person in the world. I called Emily, expecting her to be mad, but she just said, "Maggie, it's okay. I get it, but you need to take care of yourself." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd been so focused on building my empire that I'd forgotten to take care of myself and the people who mattered most. So I did something I hadn't done in months. I took a day off. I spent the day with Emily eating pizza, watching bad rom-coms, and catching up on everything I'd missed. It was exactly what I needed. Also, it turns out that pizza tastes better when you're not eating it over a pile of wax shavings. But the universe wasn't done testing me. A few days later, I got a call from my manufacturer. There'd been a mix-up with one of our shipments, and 10,000 candles had been sent to the wrong warehouse. I spent the next 48 hours frantically trying to track them down, only to discover that they'd been accidentally shipped to a store in another state. It was a nightmare, but it taught me an important lesson. I couldn't do everything on my own. I needed help. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a team. First, I brought on a logistics manager to handle shipping and inventory. Her name was Lisa, and she was a wizard with spreadsheets. Then I hired a social media manager to take over my Instagram and TikTok accounts. His name was Ryan, and he had a knack for turning my rambling thoughts into viral content. With their help, I was able to focus on the things I loved most: creating new scents, designing packaging, and connecting with customers. But the biggest turning point came when I realized that my business was about more than just candles. One day, I got an email from a woman who'd bought one of my Mystic Forest candles. She told me that she'd been going through a tough time. Her mom had been diagnosed with cancer, and she'd been struggling to cope. But lighting my candle every night had brought her a sense of peace and comfort. I cried when I read her email. Okay, fine, I cry a lot, but can you blame me? It hit me then that my candles weren't just products. They were little pieces of joy, comfort, and magic that I was putting out into the world. And that was something worth fighting for. So, I made a decision. I was going to use my business to make a difference. My business was thriving, my team was amazing, and I was finally starting to feel like I'd made it. But then, something happened that I hadn't expected. The crawl back. It started with the DMS. Oh, the DMS. As soon as my candles started appearing in major stores and my Instagram following exploded, my inbox became a graveyard of awkward messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. First, there was Jessica, my high school frenemy, who sent me a message saying, "OMG, I always knew you'd make it big." Funny, because the last time I checked, she'd unfollowed me after I posted a selfie with a double chin. Then there was Mark, my ex, who sent me a casual, "Hey, stranger," text like we were old pals. Spoiler, we weren't. The last time we'd spoken, he'd told me my candles were a waste of time. But the real kicker came when my former boss from the coffee shop sent me a LinkedIn request with a note that said, "Let me know if you're hiring." I almost spit out my LaCroix when I saw it. Okay, fine, it was tea. I'd given up coffee after one too many caffeine-induced panic attacks. The audacity was astronomical. Like, bro, where were you when I was crying over my credit card statement and eating ramen for the 47th night in a row? But instead of being bitter, okay, maybe a little bitter, I decided to have some fun with it. I started posting passive-aggressive memes on Instagram like, when your empire is thriving, but your friends are still stuck in 2018 energy. And you know what? It felt good. But the crawlback didn't stop there. Oh no, it got worse. One day, I got a call from my mum. She'd been bragging about me to everyone at church, conveniently forgetting how she used to call my candles a waste of time. Funny how success changes people's perspectives, huh? Then there was my distant cousin who invited me to a family reunion out of the blue. Spoiler, I didn't go. I was too busy working on a new product line. And then there was the piece de resistance. My old college roommate who showed up at my warehouse unannounced, claiming she just happened to be in the neighbourhood. Sure, Jan, it had nothing to do with the fact that I'd just been featured in Forbes. The audacity was unreal, but instead of letting it get to me, I decided to lean into it. I decided it was time to take my revenge to the next level, but not in a petty, dramatic way. No, I was going to do it classy. Enter the launch party. I'd just finished designing a new line of candles called Luxe and Lavish, and I decided to throw a glamorous launch party to celebrate. But this wasn't just any party. Oh no, this was going to be the event of the year. And guess who was on the guest list? Everyone who'd ever doubted me, ghosted me, or told me my candles were a waste of time. First on the list, my former boss from the coffee shop. You know, the one who'd fired me and then had the audacity to ask if I was hiring. Next, my ex, Mark, because what's a revenge party without an ex? And of course, my high school frenemy, Jessica, and my distant cousin, who'd suddenly remembered I existed. I rented out a swanky event space downtown, complete with a candle-themed photo booth, a signature cocktail called the Wicked Mule, and a live band that played nothing but Taylor Swift songs. Because if you're going to have a revenge party, you might as well do it right. The night of the party, I showed up in a killer outfit that made me feel like $1,000,000. Okay, fine, it was a dress I'd found on sale at Nordstrom Rack, but it looked expensive. My team had outdone themselves with the decorations, and the entire space smelled like a mix of enchanted woods and mystic forest, which, by the way, is the best combination ever. As the guests started arriving, I couldn't help but feel a little smug. There was my former boss, looking awkward in a suit that was 2 sizes too big. There was Mark, trying and failing to look cool while sipping his Wicked Mule. And there was Jessica, pretending not to be impressed by the photo booth. But the real highlight of the night was my speech. I stood up in front of the crowd, holding a glass of champagne. Okay, fine, it was sparkling cider, and said, "Thank you all for coming tonight. This has been an incredible journey, and I couldn't have done it without the support of the people who believed in me from the beginning." Then I paused, looked directly at my former boss, and added, "And to everyone who doubted me, thank you for the motivation. I couldn't have done it without you either." The room erupted in applause, and I swear I saw my former boss turn red. Okay, fine. Maybe I imagined that part, but it felt good. The rest of the night was a blur of laughter, dancing, and way too many Wicked Mules. I even caught Mark trying to sneak a candle into his coat pocket. Classy dude. Real classy. But the best part, seeing the looks on everyone's faces as they realised just how far I'd come. The launch party had been a huge success, and my luxe and lavish line was selling out faster than I could keep up with. But as I sat there, scrolling through the photos from the party and sipping my La Croix, okay, fine, it was tea, I realised something. My success wasn't just about the candles. Sure, the candles were amazing. I mean, have you smelled enchanted woods? It's like a forest nymph's dream in a jar. But my business was about more than that. It was about proving to myself that I could do it, that I could take an idea, no matter how crazy, and turn it into something real. It was also about the people, the customers who'd supported me from the beginning, the team who'd helped me build my empire, and the friends who'd stood by me through the ramen nights and the existential crises. And then there were the people who doubted me, the ones who told me my candles were a waste of time, who'd ghosted me when I needed them most, and who'd come crawling back when I made it big. At first, I'd been bitter. Okay, fine, maybe a little bitter. But as I sat there, surrounded by the sweet smell of success, I realised that I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone but myself. And that felt amazing. But the real turning point came when I got an email from a woman who'd bought one of my luxe and lavish candles. She told me that she'd been going through a tough time. Her mum had been diagnosed with cancer, and she'd been struggling to cope. But lighting my candle every night had brought her a sense of peace and comfort. I cried when I read her email. Okay, fine, I cry a lot. But can you blame me? It hit me then that my candles weren't just products. They were little pieces of joy, comfort, and magic that I was putting out into the world. And that was something worth fighting for. So, I made a decision. I was going to use my business to make a difference. I started a program called Candles for a Cause, where a portion of every sale went to charities that supported mental health, cancer research, and other causes close to my heart. I also started hosting workshops for aspiring entrepreneurs, sharing my story and offering advice on how to turn their dreams into reality. And you know what? It felt good. But the best part? Seeing the impact my candles were having on people's lives, whether it was bringing a little bit of joy to someone's day or helping them through a tough time, my candles were making a difference. And that was worth more than any amount of money or success. So, there I was, sitting in my penthouse office. Okay, fine, it was a slightly nicer warehouse, surrounded by candles that smelled like success and spite, watching my notifications blow up with messages from people who suddenly wanted to be my bestie. And you know what? I was thriving. Because nothing says "I told you so" like building an empire out of sheer willpower and a glue gun.